welcome to our 21st session of Vraja-mandala, and a most sacred day. Every single day of our Vraja-mandala is particularly sacred and special. When we go to the different holy places, each place has its unique brilliance. But also when we celebrate the acharyas, yesterday we celebrated Srila Bhaktivedanta Svami Maharaja and Srila Bhaktivedanta Parikrama Maharaj. And we should appreciate they obviously chose to leave this world in the month of Kartik, thus creating even more speciality about this month. Many great personalities. We have the appearance day of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Maharaj. We have the disappearance day of Pramod Puri Maharaj, the disappearance day of Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Different personalities all the way through to enhance the brilliance of this month. So this Tirabhav today is most special in the appreciation of the preaching in the Western world of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So today we will be honoring him with our katha. So, but first we'll have our kirtan and celebrate the Radha Kripa Kataksha and Namami Nandananda.
Namo Vishnupadaya Radhikaya Priyamanale Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayaniti Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadishadharine Namo Vishnupadaya Gaura Prasthaya Bhutale Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Keshavaditi Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Swati Namine Namo Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Hare Krishna. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavina Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavina Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Munindra Vrindavandite Triloka Shaukahari Prashannavan Prabandhajai Nikunja Bhuvilase Rajendra Manunandini Rajendra Suru Sangate Jadajari Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Ashoka Vishwavallari Vitana Mandapasvite Pravara Vala Pallava Prabhanurangitomale Paramaya Spuratare Prabhu Samvedalaye Jadajari Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Anandaranga Mangala Prasanna Bandhura Bhuvam Savibramam Sasambhavam Vijanta Bhanatanai Nirantaram Vashikita Pratiti Nandanandane Tadajayusya Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Vishvana Champada Pradita Dora Vigrahe Mukha Prabhakarastapa Disara Tendu Mandale Vichitra Chitra Sancharat Chakora Savalakshane Tadajalisya Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Yogane Pramodamana Mandite Priyanurada Rangite Kalavilasa Pandite Ananya Danya Kunjaraja Kama Keli Kavite Kadatarisya Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Krishna Hava Bhava Hira Hira Hara Bhushite Prabhu Tasata Kumbha Kumbha Kumbhi Kumbha Sesame Shasya Manda Hasya Chana Sotya Satya Sajane Kadatarisya Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Nallari Taranga Ranga Dolati Latara Vasya Lolani Valochana Valochani Alalurandi Landanoja Moha Mohana Shite Kadalari Siyama Pripata Takshavajana Sutra Mandali Gunam Viratmahiti Kalola Nila Kuntala Prasuna Docha Kampitai Kadatarisya Siyamam Pripata Takshavajana Avinvalandamana Pushpamekalagune Prashasvaratna Kindini Kalapamanyamaya Indra Sundadambika Varoha Somagarake Ganagarisya Siyamam Pripata Takshavajana Manjanadama Januparasvara Samajaraja Vansavansanitvanati Vilola Hema Malani Vidam Vicharu Chandrame Yada karishyasi amam kripatakashabhajam Anantakoti Vishnu Lokananda Padmajarchite Vimadrijam Puromajam Virincha Javarare Aparasi Viridikya Satparam Dorina Kejaragarishyasi Amam Kripatakam Shabhajanam Priyeshwari Swareshwari Sureshwari Triveda Bharateshwari Pramana Sasaneshwari Naveshwari Sameshwari Pamona Kananeshwari Rajeshwari Rajadite Viradite Namostute Iti Mamagutam Sama Vishanya Bharunam Viti Karomi Sankatam Jayam Kripatakam Shabhajanam Avrita Sanchita Rupa Karma Nasanam Mandala Parikrama Jadakari Srimam Mandalam Sukarna Ratna Kundalam Sucharchitam Chandanam Namami Nandanandanam Sudhivanetna Pankajam Shikishikandha Murajam Ananda Bhoti Mohanam Namami Nandanandanam Surasukandha Moktikam Swatandadanda Pankikam Navandunanda Chitanam Namami Nandanandanam Karena Venuranjitam Yati Karindra Danjitam Durula Pita Shoranam Namami Nandanandanam Mangadeha Sundara Nakaduti Sudakaram Amulya Ratna Bhushanam Namami Nandanandanam Sujanda Anga Saurabham Guru Virajita Subham Surashri Vatsalam Shanam Namami Nandanandanam Lavana Sunagaram Vilasanuga Varsasam Surendra Gardamoshanam Namami Nandanandanam Prajanjana Sunayatam Sada Sukadadayatam Jagannana Nalamanam Namami Nandanandanam Srinandanandanastatam Tadevya Shradhayam Vina Tare Bhava Hindustaram Lavetaram Riyogmatam Namami Nandanandanam Namami Nandanandanam Namami Nandanandanam Namami Nandanandanam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Gurudeva 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Haribo Jai Shri Shri Guru Garanga Ganhavita Didithari Radha Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai Radha Gopinath Ju Ki Jai Sachinandana Gaurahari Ki Jai Nityananda Rai Ki Jai Jai Nitya Lila Pravishna Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nitya Lila Pravishna Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Tirabhav Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Nitya Lila Pravishna Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Jagat Guru Nitya Lila Pravishna Om Asto Tarasara Shishimat Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Paramahamsa Mahabhagavat Srila Gaura Kishodas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Saptam Goswami Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Jai Vaishnav Sabharoma Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Srila Baladev Vidibhushan Gaudiya Vedanta Acharya Ki Jai Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai Jai Narottam Srinivas Shyamananda Prabhu Treya Ki Jai Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami Ki Jai Jai Shri Rup Sanatan Shri Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Sad Goswami Prabhu's Ki Jai Jai Swarup Damodar Rai Ramananda Gauda Parsada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sika Holsi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Shri Gauda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Ki Jai Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai Nam Bhajan Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Ki Jai Nishingadev Bhagavan Ki Jai Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai Gopishwa Mahadev Ki Jai Punamasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Antadvip Mayapur Simantadvip Gautamdvip Madhidvip Koladvip Ritudvip Dhanadvip Mudamdvip Buddhadvip Atmakanabadvip Dham Ki Jai Bandiravan Badravan Belvan Lohavan Mahavan Madhuvan Talvan Kamudvan Bahulavan Vrindavan Kadyavan Kamyavan Vraja-mandala Ki Jai Ujjavrat Ki Jai Damodar Brat Ki Jai Nima Seva Ki Jai Chatumasya Brat Ki Jai Tirubhav Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoda Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Om Agina Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tarale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarvaktaya Namo Namaha Anapita Chirim Chirat Kurunavarathanokala Samarapaitam Unnata Ujvala Rasam Swapakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundarata Dikatamba Sadipita Sada Hridare Kandare Sparatu Vasachinandanaha Yam Pravajantamanapetyam Apeti Krityam Dvaipaino Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putre Titam Mayatayo Taravo Vinirustam Sarvabhutam Hridim Munimanatoshmi Bhaktiya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Shiptascha Karmari Tarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapana Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Varadram Tato Mamanasti Katyana Kapi Tavaivasmi Najivami Tvaivina Iti Vignaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam. I'm first of all offering millions and millions of Dandava pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nityalila Pravishta Om, Asto Tadasara Shishimat, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions and millions of times, unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nityalila Pravishta Om, Asto Tadasara Shishimat, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And all our Rupanuga Guru Vargya, and all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord, my Dandavat pranams to all of you. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha, kripa sindhuvevacha, patitanam papnivyo Vaishnave namaha. So we have these two exceptional days in a row where we can attempt to invoke the presence of these divine personalities by our remembrances of them. Personally, yesterday when we were reading the letter and the essay by the lecture by Srila Trivikram Maharaj, I was feeling very enlivened by both of these personalities. That was how I experienced that. And similarly, any time that we glorify a great personality on their appearance days, always understood there's like a window open directly to the spiritual world where that person can manifest. So today we are attempting to glorify something of our most divine master, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In my life personally, being connected with him, I can remember having his picture on my wall in about 1974 and just being amazed at how beautiful his face was and was most attracted to his form and made some type of connection through reading that Nectar of Devotion, which was widely published at that time. But in my own personal spiritual life, then I've always felt that Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada has never been more than a breath away from me the whole time. He has always been present by his extreme causeless mercy and his oceanic munificence. We read so many different pastimes by the different devotees offering their homages and pushpanjali to him, and he touched the hearts of everyone. He had this shakti, this ability to enter just by his extreme sensitive kindness and generous heart into the consciousnesses of everybody that he met. So many different people, strangers practically, that just had darshan of him for a moment would remember him for the rest of their lives. This impression that he was able to distribute because of his extreme dedication and love to his Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, where he received the full current of all the imports of Shastra fully. And Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, he's receiving everything from Gorkishore Das Babaji as well as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. My Gurudev often tells us that whenever we glorify any Vaishnava, we should glorify at least his 6 predecessors to appreciate where this current is coming from. Ultimately, this current is coming from Rupa Goswami. It's all being passed down from him, originally from Sachinandan Gaurahari, and then prior to that, Ishwara Puri, prior to that, Madhavendra Puri. This is the current, this is the line which we are swimming in today. It's their mercy entirely. But the exceptional glories of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is that his
preaching went off with such a crescendo of brilliance, coming to the West for only such a brief time, practically 10 years. But what was he able? He himself was totally astonished at Krishna's mercy in turning those hearts to become attracted and dedicated, not just attracted, but totally dedicated. Young men who were basically trying to enjoy their senses to the max at that time in the mid-60s, in every form and fashion, all of a sudden rising at 4 o'clock in the morning, taking cold showers, chanting 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra, giving up smoking, giving up womanizing, giving up drugs, giving up meat, all of these things just dropping like this. This is remarkable that he had that potency to inspire so many thousands and thousands of individuals to completely change their hearts, to completely revolutionize. Why? Because he only spoke the words of Krishna. When we listen to any of his recorded lectures and so on, he's just repeating Shastra, 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 Shastra constantly. I was listening today and he was saying, anyone who thinks they have an opinion on this, then this is nonsense. We have no opinion. We just take the words of Shastra. And it's the words of Shastra that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that Shabda Brahman, that sound vibration coming directly from Krishna. He was exactly like Krishna with a flute, playing, calling all those hippies to him. And they dedicated, even today, even if they left their practices and so on, none of them can forget the speciality of Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes we see different devotees that have left their practices quite early on when Prabhupada was there, but still they can never forget the affection because they've never experienced that transcendental connection prior to that. So this personality, no one else came to the Western world somehow because he was appointed by Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. And he was nominated to do this task. And he was berating himself much of his life for not acting on his Gurudev's words much earlier. But then he describes it at the fag end of his life, when he was practically 70 years old. Then he crossed the rough Atlantic Ocean and the Arabian Ocean and the Indian Ocean at great expense to his health. And he arrived in Boston. And immediately he began to touch the hearts of all he had met. But just appreciate for a moment the austerity that must have been for. He had been living in Radha Damodar Mandir in Vrindavan, next to Jamuna Devi, next to all the exceptional deities of Vrindavan, living with Pakka Vaishnavas and Srila Bhakti-Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, my Gurudev, many beautiful, wonderful Vaishnavas. And all of a sudden he came to this land where there were no Vaishnavas, basically. And he ended up doing a program with one yogi, a sort of a high-class type of yogi. He would go and cook for him, like a menial servant. But he was contributing what? He was contributing his prashadam, his energy, to all these personalities. And gradually, we know all the story. The stories are world famous, how he began in the 2nd Avenue storefront. Then they went to that park in New York, Tompkins Square Park, and began that congregational chanting. This must have been, for the Devas watching, monumental when Prabhupada began that kirtan, because they would have known what was actually going to happen from that point. And here was this older man, beating this drum. Wasn't even a mridanga, and vigorously for so many hours. And he'd had a heart attack previously, but he was completely empowered by the mercy of Sachinandan Gaurahari. And then he managed to give us Mahaprabhu. This is phenomenal. To change the heart is one thing. To bring someone from a debauched life and to reform their external behavior, but then to change the heart internally, where their dedication to serving Radha and Krishna becomes completely fixed and focused. This is another stage of brilliance, his genius. There are so many anecdotes that demonstrate his immediate wit, in intelligence, etc. I remember one time a reporter came to him. She was just wearing a short mini skirt, and she was saying to Prabhupada, "Why do you shave your head?" Prabhupada immediately responded, "Why do you shave your legs?" He said, "Better to have a cool head than cold legs." But just instantly, his wit would transform the people in front of him. And so many times like that. One time, when he was doing his Ratha Yatra, the first time in Trafalgar Square, this was such a big thing for a little Bengali to come to England and hold a Ratha Yatra right under Trafalgar Square. This is Queen Victoria's land, and he'd been brought up in the British Raj in Bengal, and now he was conquering the British public at the same place, Trafalgar Square, and they had only permission to just do the Ratha Yatra festival. But Prabhupada arranged very quickly to have a fire sacrifice. And the devotees told him, "But we don't have permission for that." Prabhupada said, "Don't worry, just do the fire sacrifice." And then devotees were getting married. He was performing the marriage ceremony there. And then afterwards, the devotees, they commented the next day, "Prabhupada, you were so brave doing like that." And Prabhupada, he said, "I've always been brave. My whole life I've been brave. Even in my school, I was brave. But where does this bravery come from?" We should consider this today when we consider the previous acharyas. That boldness came from Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. And that boldness came from Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji. And that boldness came from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is where it's coming. It's originating with Rupa Goswami, because there's no boundaries to how this philosophy can be propagated in the world. So we are celebrating beautifully. Today, I was actually considering whether to read a very beautiful Viraha homage that Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has written to his Gurudev in 1959. That was published in the Harmonist magazine. Or whether to read one of his purports. Because Prabhupada said himself that all his ecstasies are bound up in his Bhaktivedanta purports of his Bhagavatam, and also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We see what Prabhupada has included in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We should be very aware of this. He's given us the whole Brahmara Gita, this 46th chapter, very esoteric chapter, the most confidential truths. And Prabhupada, in his purport, he gives us the whole chapter and all the translations. And he gives us the whole chapter of the Mahishi Gita also. That's from the 10th canto. But he includes so many very high, beautiful truths within his commentaries of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So if anyone considers that Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada didn't give everything, then they haven't studied his books at all, because he gave every single aspect that we've needed and will need in the future. He was preaching and always coining the expression for the next 10,000 years. He was preaching to lay that foundation, to lay that platform for our welfare, for our benefit. What would be the value in just coming for one generation of people? What value really would that have in really helping the conditioned souls? Prabhupada had that long vision. He knew this is going to take generations to actually understand these really esoteric truths about the identity of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu coming to taste his own beauty. How are you going to explain that to somebody? just today, this morning, a couple of gentlemen came from Bengal, and I was speaking to them about Mahaprabhu, and I was trying to explain that God wants to taste himself. They couldn't. How can you grasp that conception? That the Supreme Lord, they were following Sanatan Dham, but to understand God, Krishna, wants to taste himself, how are you going to teach that? It's going to take a lot of time, because there's many aspects to build around the platform so that someone feels secure and safe to travel on this journey of consciousness. So Prabhupada was building on every front, every single front, non-stop, daily, through those very brief, almost 10 years, just on such a kaleidoscope. We were just saying before we began this program that when we begin to speak on the glories of Prabhupada, it's like we have the whole universe to go in, because he spoke to the whole universe. Nothing sectarian, nothing about just this group or that group or this group. Whatever has eventuated from his preaching is another issue. But at the time of his preaching, it was simply to spread this mission of Sachinandan Gaurahari, which is Ragmarg Bhakti Loke Karite Prachan. This is what his intention was. But he had to make some platform first. So today, we're very fortunate to have Nrsimha Prabhu with us, and he had darshan of Prabhupada directly. So Nrsimha Prabhu will speak for 15 minutes or so and give us his Pushpanjali to Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada today.
Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshur Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikayai Tadalayai Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Radhikayai Priyatmane Susimad Bhaktivedanta Narayanati Namane Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Jai Srila Prabhupada. So we're on pilgrimage, we're on Parikram, but where is the higher place of pilgrimage than the lotus feet of the pure devotee? Because Krishna is there. Where the pure devotee is, Krishna is in his heart, and the pure devotee is in Krishna's heart. So this is a very important part of our parikram, is to come to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. So there's a few things I want to share. Just one thing came to me when, Maharaj, when you were saying how just meeting Prabhupada for a moment or whatever, even if people, they didn't become devotees per se, or if they fell from their practices, they'd never forget. So when Prabhupada first came to America, actually he came to where he had some connection in Butler, PA, to a family called the Agarwals. And talk about Prabhupada's tolerance and sweetness. They were an Indian gentleman and his wife and their little baby. They had meat. The fridge was full of meat. Prabhupada just cleared a little space on one shelf that didn't say anything. Just, in fact, Prabhupada, before he came, he told some godbrothers, he was very clear, if necessary, I will prepare meat and fish and eggs for them, because I have full confidence that by hearing this message of Mahaprabhu, by this chanting, then their hearts will be purified. I have full confidence. So I saw this video they were making of people who had met Prabhupada, and they were speaking to Sally Agarwal. She was the mother there. And she was recollecting, and you could see she was having a realization. She spoke towards the end of the interview. Said, yes, Swami stayed with us, and that was the happiest time of my life. She had that realization at that moment. It's very sweet. So one time, I believe it was Tamal Krishna Goswami, went to Prabhupada, and he said, Prabhupada, you've said that you are not different to your books. Yes? Yes, same. Then why does anybody need to come to you? Why do they need to hear from you? They can just read your books. Prabhupada sitting on the floor, his little, desk there. He leaned over, he grabbed, like I say, Tamal, I think, his ear, twisted it. And he said, because the books, they cannot do that. This is an incredibly important point. See, we have a difficulty because we're materialists in duality. So we have to see things classified. Black, white, yes, right, yes, wrong, yes, no, right, wrong, etc. We can't help it. But spiritual reality is not like that. It's transcendental to all our little boxes, and it's inconceivable, and it's achintya bheda bheda. So yes, the guru and the books are the same, and yes, they are different, and the potency is different, unless there's an exception. You're very advanced, in which case you're directly associating, or you're receiving the mercy of guru. Because definitely we know of people, especially in Eastern European countries, where there's very little association, and they can be very serious and grateful when they get a book or whatever. And we've heard different stories of persons there seeing Prabhupada in a dream, him giving them an instruction, and then becoming very serious devotees for the rest of their life, very inspired. But in general, for us, there is a difference. And the pure devotee, he is constantly emitting a divine fragrance, a pollen of dust particles from the lotus feet of Radha Krishna, a pollen, a fragrance of pure love, of prem. And in the immediate association of such a personality, incredible things can happen. So there's a verse, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Kaya, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Haya. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and this means Lava Matra, one moment. It's actually a definite Vedic time period that is minuscule. Just one moment's association of a pure devotee, all Shastra affirm this, is enough to award you all perfection in life. One moment's association. How is it possible? Because the pure devotee is not within material time. A moment, a million years, what's the difference from the spiritual viewpoint? Transcendental. So I've no idea how it works, or how sometimes we can be so blessed, and others, they are living with the spiritual master for years and not seeming to really take in. Who can understand these things? But I can tell you briefly my story. In 1977, in January, I was at Kumbh Mela in Allahabad. Prabhupada went. I did not know at that time Prabhupada is actually quite ill, and that year he's going to go. Because I was in a different group. I was the only Westerner, and I was a Mayavadi and personalist Swami at 22 years of age, just 22. And I decided I wanted to see Prabhupada to challenge him and defeat him to establish the supremacy of, why are you laughing? To establish the supremacy of, because that's what we do. So many times, and we should understand this as devotees, we build up, we express with great faith and zeal how great our guru and our movement is, but it's not actually really purely a glorification. It's because it's my group, it's my belief, I'm part of that, therefore it's the best. Have to be careful with that as devotees as well, very careful. So I went to see Prabhupada with that mood. And on my way to him, I was going through my mind just basic arguments that are very common amongst impersonal. How can you say God is this symbolic name? this deity. I mean, the name, come on. Beginning, end. Hare Krishna. There you go. I put it in my mouth. And you want to say it's non-different from that within which everything is contained? This little deity, I can pick him up. I can touch. How can you say this is the infinite God? So this I'm thinking. So I go to ISKCON and where is your guru, your leader? He's in here. And I was expecting some fancy whatever. No. They have a big pandal. Next to the pandal is a little tent. And Prabhupada was very short physically, 5 foot and a very few inches. And so the opening to the tent is very low. And I had to duck down to go in. And I'm telling you, going in there was another world. It's like that's the material world. I didn't know it, but I started to feel. And I walked and I saw Prabhupada. Maharaj mentioned he was beautiful. Prabhupada was beautiful. He was radiant, effulgent, golden. He had on a pale saffron cloth. He's sitting on a low bed, Indian, they call that charpai, little wooden thing, only a foot high, ropes instead of a box spring, whatever, thin little mattress covered in a white sheet, light saffron, and so attractive. And I didn't even realize what happened. The moment I went in, I forgot everything that was in I forgot it completely. I was so not present to it, I didn't realize I'd forgotten it. It was gone. And there's about a dozen Indians in there. And I'm feeling the presence of a personality who's like, I have never met. And I've been with some pretty far out yogis and mystics. This was a whole nother world. And I immediately wanted to sit down as out of the way as possible. So I sat almost next to this little door, whatever. And I'm just looking at Prabhupada. And then one Indian said, Swamiji, what is meaning of Bhagavad Gita? And Prabhupada's answer was basically, so everybody, they want to know who is God, how to come to God. So God himself is coming and telling. And in my mind, I thought, wow, that's clear. I can't argue with that. And that was my last conscious thought. I can't argue with that. And slowly all the guests left one by one. It's just me and Prabhupada, not even a servant. And Prabhupada looks at me. And later on, I realized Prabhupada would do this. So Prabhupada, he had a way he would look and he would raise his head and his eyebrows and his chin all at once. But his eyes would stay focused on you. And he would usually, in fact, pretty much every time, he would go, so, or, With me, he didn't say a word. He just went, like, what's your question? And I was looking at him, but I couldn't hold his gaze for very long at all. I had nothing to say, nothing. And I looked at his feet. And then my next conscious thought, I thought, if I could stay at these feet for the rest of my life, I would be happy. And Prabhupada just let me bathe in his presence for a couple of minutes. And then he called, give him some prasad. It's like a Vaikuntha airplane. Every movement Prabhupada made, you even on the videos, when you pick his nose, what's it look like when people pick their nose? It's not very attractive. And you're wondering what are they going to do with the next. With Prabhupada, Prabhupada, it was like a bird came in, a plane, and this graceful movement. And you just watch his hand fly, and you'd be like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Maharaj Rishabhadev passed stool. It smells of roses. This is the transcendental world. It's all beautiful and perfect. This is Prabhupada. So, I've got a couple of minutes. So, but to understand Prabhupada, as I mentioned at the beginning, his books are there. Today, many people, all devotees, they argue about many different parts of philosophy, holding up the same book. The same verses, different interpretations, different understandings. Prabhupada says in his books, in order to understand the words of a pure devotee, you need a pure devotee to explain to you. Otherwise, your own mind will just do its thing. So when I had come to Srila Gurudev by Prabhupada's grace many years later, the first book I read of Srila Gurudev's was called Gauravani Pracharane, which is amazing. And by Gurudev's grace, I began to understand who Prabhupada was. Like, apart from that beautiful, sentimental, heart-touching, totally changed my life moment, turned me from an impersonalist to somebody looking for bhakti, for God, for service. But to understand, really, Gurudev's book told me who Prabhupada was. And I realized, I was reading that book, how ignorant I'd been around devotees, since the late 70s, right? Until I came to Gurudev, I didn't even know, and I didn't even know that I didn't know what Prabhupada's name was. He was just Prabhupada. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is the formal. But Srila Prabhupada. And Swami, well, every sannyasi is a Swami or a Goswami. I never quite figured out why some were Swami and one Goswami, but anyway, they're all Swamis and Goswamis. I didn't even know, and I'm wondering how many other devotees in ISKCON also didn't know, that actually Swami was a sannyas name. Swami Maharaj had no idea. Never mind understanding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and what is Gauravani Pracharane. We only were learning what was Nirvishesha Shunyavadi. Anyway, I don't want to go on much longer, but there is one more thing I want to say. Srila Prabhupada called himself A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Maharaj was mentioning how Prabhupada was always brave. Abhay Charan means fearless, Abhay, at the lotus feet. And his Guru Maharaj, his sannyas Guru Maharaj as well, gave him Abhay Charan Aravinda, to make this very clear. But it's A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, not P.C. You know what is P.C.? P.C. is a Western letters. It means politically correct. If you want to be popular and approved, you must be P.C. So there is now a movement in the name of much of ISKCON, unfortunately, that wants to make what Prabhupada gave us popular and approved. And it is diluting so much of what he said and changing so much of what he said, editing it out. But Prabhupada said, I never compromised. That's what he wants. But I just want to end this with saying, in order to fasten our own minds and hearts at his feet, really, and have that shelter of his feet, we can't do it on our own. We must have the guidance of other great Vaishnavas. And if we've denied ourselves that for 30, 40, close to 50 years, we don't really know who Prabhupada is. So with that, I want to offer my eternal gratitude to my Guru, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj, to my Guru, because I can't think of him any other way, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, and beg from all the devotees, especially my beloved seniors, such as Tridandi Maharaj, their continued expression of my Guru's kindness and tolerance and patience, because I'm very materialistic and very fallen and foolish. And I beg all of your blessings that I may never forget Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Vanshakapatarubhischa, Kripa Sindhubhya Vichapatitanam, Bhavanebi Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Maharaj.
Jai. Nrsimha Prabhu. Thank you so much for that most illuminating and heart-touching sharing that experience that you had with Prabhupada. When you were looking at his feet, I didn't want to leave also. I was feeling close with you, and also wanted to stay in that place. You described that very, very, very beautifully. Very beautifully. Thank you for that. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Deeply grateful. So, going through the various options of, because I only met Prabhupada personally in my dreams, and I realized he was very short, even in his dreams, even in my dreams. He was short in stature, but very, as you said, completely transcendental on another platform altogether. But I was contemplating what to share, and what I would really most like to share or read is one of his commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam, which to me encapsulates the entirety of his teachings. His teachings are the principle. His character, his personality is so heart-moving, like you've described. It's strong enough to shatter mountains practically, mountains of pride, mountains of ignorance. But his written purports, commentaries, they live on. We have these for posterity that we can hold on to and forever go over again and again. So today I was looking at the second canto, chapter 3, and is a very beautiful sequence of verses. And it begins that both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. Do the trees not live? Do the bellows of the blacksmith not breathe? All around us do the beasts not eat and discharge semen? Men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna, the deliverer from all evils. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes, and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. The upper portion of the body, though crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden, if not bowed down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti, freedom. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man, if not engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead. The eyes, which do not look at the symbolic representations of the personality of Godhead Vishnu, his form, name, quality, etc., are like those printed on the plumes of a peacock, and the legs, which do not move to the holy places where the Lord is remembered, are considered dead tree trunks. So this third chapter of the Bhagavatam principally is the introduction to Shukadev Goswami. Shukadev Goswami appears at the very end of the first canto, in the last chapter, the 19th chapter, and then he begins to speak in this second canto. This whole second canto basically is a reflection or an introduction of Shukadev Goswami and him illuminating many principal truths. So it's talking about here the universal form. So Prabhupada is going to reference it in this purport. So if you can be patient and just listen to this purport, I think we will all be benefited. So the translation, this is verse number 24. He says, certainly, the translation is, certainly that heart is steel framed
which in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. So I've often considered this because obviously I've been chanting and others are chanting, but are their hairs standing on end? Is there trembling in the body? Are tears coming to the eyes while we chant? Then that must indicate that my heart is steel framed. So I wanted to understand this point personally today, which is why I actually looked at this purport. And Prabhupada, it's such an illuminating purport. So purport by Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We should note with profit that in the first 3 chapters of the second canto, a gradual process of development of devotional service is being presented. So I was very encouraged just now to hear Nrsimha Prabhu tell me that this second canto hasn't been done over by enthusiastic editors strangling the words of Srila Prabhupada. To me, this is the most horrific thing we can do to his legacy, is to think that we know what he meant more than what he wrote. This is despicable, and it's very, very difficult to forgive such a transgression of Prabhupada's desires when that has actually taken place. But there are copies of Bhagavad Gita, the 1971 Macmillan edition, 1972, that we can take shelter of, that has the original purports. So that is there. And as Nrsimha Prabhu was just telling us, that the first canto may have been adulterated, but the second canto, I believe anyway, is intact. So we're hearing Prabhupada's words. In the first chapter, the first step in devotional service for God consciousness is the process of hearing and chanting has been stressed, and a gross conception of the personality of Godhead in his universal form for the beginners is recommended. This is the Virat Rupa. The Virat Rupa is mentioned 5 times in the first 3 cantos. It's very important. By such a gross conception of God through the material manifestations of his energy, one is enabled to spiritualize the mind and the senses and gradually concentrate the mind upon Lord Vishnu, the Supreme, who is present as the Supersoul in every heart and everywhere, in every atom of the material universe. The system of Pancha Upasana, recommending 5 mental attitudes for the common man, is also enacted for this purpose, namely gradual development, worship of the superior, that may be in the form of fire, electricity, the sun, the mass of living beings, Lord Shiva, and at last, the impersonal supersoul. Prabhupada is covering everything here. We listen carefully. The partial representation of Lord Vishnu. This impersonal supersoul is the partial representation of Lord Vishnu. They are all nicely described in the second chapter, but in the third chapter, further development is prescribed after one has actually reached the stage of Vishnu worship or pure devotional service, and the mature stage of Vishnu worship is suggested herein in relation to the change of heart. So this is what this is going to be talking about, the change of heart. The whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living being in the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord as subordinate servant, which is his eternal constitutional position. So with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the sense of material enjoyment, by a false sense of lording it over the world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. So both sides. One side is like the Nivritti Marg is giving up, and the other side is like the Pravritti Marg is the actual positive. One side is giving up the enjoying material propensity, and the other side is
taking what is anukul, what is favorable for our seva to Krishna. So both of these areas must be attended to, not just that I'm just like a yogi, just trying to give everything up without developing the attraction to Krishna. What would be the benefit in that? So both of these considerations have to be there. Prabhupada is making it very clear like this here. And an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. Vidhi bhakti, or regulated devotional service by the limbs of the body, namely the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands and legs, as already explained herein before, is now stressed herein in relation to the mind, which is the impetus for all activities of the limbs of the body. It is expected by all means that by discharging regulated devotional service, one must manifest the change of heart. If there is no such change, the heart must be considered steel-framed, for if it is not melted, even when there is chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We must always remember that hearing and chanting are the basic principles of discharging devotional duties, and if they are properly performed, there will follow the reactional ecstasy, with signs of tears in the eyes and standing of the hairs of the body. These are the natural consequences and are the preliminary symptoms of the bhav. So, just by chanting, we are coming in contact with the Lord, and whether we exhibit these symptoms externally or not, still the manifestation of the sweetness and speciality of connecting with Krishna is going to take place in the consciousness. That will still happen. And then, if we're fortunate, we will become addicted to that taste. That is the process, to become addicted to that speciality and sweetness of rendering loving service to Krishna through initially chanting his names and understanding the direction to go. It's not really difficult path, in fact. If the reaction does not take place, even after continuous hearing and chanting of the holy name of the Lord, it may be considered to be due to offenses only. That is the opinion of the Sandarbha. In the beginning of chanting of the holy name of the Lord, if the devotee has not been very careful about evading the 10 kinds of offenses at the feet of the holy name, certainly the reaction of feelings of separation will not be visible by tears in the eyes and standing of the hair on end. So we need to hear this regularly, because we're all devotees in process trying to connect closer with the Lord. So we all can just take a breath and consider, what offenses am I regularly committing that is stopping the tears coming in the eyes? Perhaps you're already weeping when you're chanting, but if you're not, then we should consider seriously the offenses. The bhav stage is manifested by 8 transcendental symptoms, namely inertness, perspiration, standing of hairs on end, failing in the voice, trembling, paleness of the body, tears in the eyes, and finally, trance. The Nectar Devotion, a summary study of Sri Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, explains these symptoms and vividly describes other transcendental symptoms, both in steady and commentary purport at the end of the 3rd chapter of the 2nd canto, and Prabhupada expressing and directing us towards Bhava Bhakti straight away. So we should see all of these directions within the Bhagavatam are all under guidance of Rupa Goswami ultimately, who is inspiring the heart of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who most assuredly is inspiring the heart of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Most assuredly. So never think that these truths are not there and we're thinking, oh, in the Bhagavatam. The point is that within the present society, they are not discussing these topics. So therefore, people might get the impression that these topics are not in Prabhupada's books, but the truth is that they're not being openly discussed. Prabhupada is openly discussing this in just the 2nd canto. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur
has very critically discussed all these bhav displays in connection with some unscrupulous neophytes' imitating the above symptoms for cheap appreciation. Because they've been so intimidated by the possibility of cheap imitation, then they've basically thrown the baby out with the bathwater in a sense, and they're not making it a priority to discuss these topics because they're so intimidated by the possibility of Sahajism. Not only Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, but also Srila Rupa Goswami treated them very critically. Sometimes all the above 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by the mundane devotees, the Prakriti Sahajiyas, but the pseudo-symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo-devotee addicted to so many unfavorable things. Even though decorated with the signs of a devotee, a person addicted to smoking, drinking, or illegitimate sex with women cannot have all the above-mentioned ecstatic symptoms. But it is seen that sometimes these symptoms are willfully imitated, and for this reason Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur accuses the imitators of being stone-hearted men. They are sometimes even affected by the reflection of such transcendental symptoms. This pratibimba abhas is described, this reflection. Yet, if they still do not give up the forbidden habits, they are hopeless cases for transcendental realization. When Lord Chaitanya met Ramananda Rai at Kuwari on the bank of the Godavari, the Lord developed all these symptoms, but because of the presence of some non-devotee brahmanas who were in attendance of the Rai, the Lord suppressed these symptoms. So sometimes they are not visible even in the body of the first-class devotee for certain circumstantial reasons. Therefore, real steady bhav is definitely displayed in the matter of cessation of material desires, kshanti, utilization of every moment in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, avyakta kalatvam. These are the 9 symptoms of bhav, Prabhupada is explaining. Eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly, nama gana sadaruchi, attraction for living in the land of the Lord, priti tat vasate stale, complete detachment from material happiness, virakti, and pridelessness, manasunyata. One who has developed all these transcendental qualities is really possessed of the bhav stage, as distinguished from the stone-hearted imitator or mundane devotee. So I'm just personally appreciating the depth with which Prabhupada is sharing these esoteric truths right at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. But I know with myself, I wasn't able to read these properly until I came in contact with my beloved Gurudev. And only hearing these topics fluently from him was I able to perceive them in Prabhupada's books. But they are all there in Prabhupada's books, as we're hearing. The whole process can be summarized as follows. The advanced devotee who chants the holy name of the Lord in a perfectly offenseless manner and is friendly to everyone can actually relish the transcendental taste of glorifying the Lord. And the result of such realization is reflected in the cessation of all material desires, etc., as mentioned above. The neophytes, due to their being in the lower stage of devotional service, are invariably envious, so much so that they invent their own ways and means of devotional regulations without following the acharyas. As such, even if they make a show of constantly chanting the holy name of the Lord, they cannot relish the transcendental taste of the holy name. Therefore, the show of tears in the eyes, trembling, perspiration, or unconsciousness, etc., is condemned. They can, however, get in touch with the pure devotee of the Lord and rectify their bad habits. Otherwise, they shall continue to be stone-hearted and unfit for any treatment. A complete progressive march on the return path back to Godhead will depend on the instructions of the revealed scriptures directed by a realized devotee. So this was just part of my
offering today, which I wanted to share the expressions of Prabhupada in his purports in describing all the details necessary for our advancement towards Bhava Bhakti, this stage of Bhava Bhakti. Everything is there within his books, without a doubt. But as Nrsimha Prabhu was explaining to us, that without the presence of the living guru to twist the ear, then this is going to be somewhat limited. So if in our hearts we are desirous for that realized soul, surely Krishna will make some arrangement for that to manifest, to have our ears pulled, etc., by the realized soul. So we're praying for that. So I won't say any more today, because I think all of us are filled with so many appreciations of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Do you have anything else you want to add, to say? Something else? You have the microphone. If you want to say something for a few minutes more.
Hare Krishna. Well, there were a few other things. So since you're asking me, so to glorify the Guru really means to commit to representing his teachings, to raising our own standards. And just like Prabhupada said some things, very, very important things. I mean, oh God, that's just, what an understatement. But one thing he said was, I never compromised. Another thing, if I have been successful at all, it's because I changed nothing. Changed nothing. Adjustments were there in preaching. If you want to speak to people that only speak English, you speak in English, but you're saying the same thing. Yeah. So what I was saying about this point, when Prabhupada left, he actually made arrangements for his movement to continue to be under divine shelter directly, in the form of both Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj. He very clearly said, you go, you can get all philosophical questions answered. He can explain the philosophy. He is my Shiksha Guru, Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He is the greatest philosopher. And he directly asked Srila Narayan Maharaj at the very end, you please continue to train my disciples. Krishna gave me, right there in the Bengali, the last conversations, he sent me so many monkeys. I did the best I could. I did not have very long. Only 12 years. 12 years is nothing, especially where we're coming from, such ignorance. So he asked Srila Narayan Maharaj what does that mean, to be the guru? Sometimes I've heard devotees get very offended when they heard that Srila Gurudev said, I am ISKCON. Well, that's because Prabhupada told him, yes, to be guru. So just like we're seeing now, there are many devotees of Srila Gurudev who's left, who have taken responsibility to teach and train to be Shiksha and Diksha gurus. So what's the difference in the situation with Prabhupada's devotees? Some very, serious persons been in Krishna consciousness a long time, etc. Here's the difference. Srila Prabhupada gave instructions that you continue your training underneath these pure devotees. Whereas the devotees that came under Srila Gurudev, they didn't break any instructions he gave. He trained them so well. They have their behavior, I've watched, their etiquette, their sadhana, their understandings are very, very evolved. Certainly at least Madhyam, Nishta, Madhyam. So they're perfectly qualified to be able to understand what Gurudev gave and to give that to others. But in Prabhupada's society, they interrupted that possibility by being disobedient to the instruction to continue your training. And not only that, they made offenses against Srila Gurudev, very serious, heavy offenses, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj as well. And it's created so many problems in ISKCON, so that we're seeing so many deviant philosophical understandings are popping up. And it's very important to recognize these, because we can all be carried away by sentiment, but we need philosophy to prevent that. And Srila Gurudev addressed some of these things. For instance, one thing was Prabhupada Nuga. Now many devotees are very proud, but you could say in a mood of service, to be Prabhupada Nuga. Their glory, Prabhupada is so great. We are just, how can you in any way, shape, or form criticize? Prabhupada is Lord Chaitanya's Senapati, commander-in-chief of the Bhaktas, certainly in the preaching world. We see that. So we are proud to call ourselves Prabhupada Nugas. Right there, they've created a huge problem for themselves and for others who are hearing, because it's philosophically so unsound. We are Rupanugas. Srila Rupa Goswami is our Sampradaya Acharya. Srila Prabhupada is not, nor is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, nor even Srila Bhaktivinoda. Srila Rupa Goswami was the one who was empowered and ordered by Mahaprabhu himself to understand, like nobody else had understood, to understand his mission and his mood. Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Ahyang Dadati Swapadantikam, and to codify this mood. The books that he wrote, Srila Prabhupada was so glorious, but he didn't compose books. He gave translations and commentaries. This is a very different thing. Is this, oh my God, you're under? No. We can't be this kind of sectarian partisanship. That doesn't belong in the spiritual world. It doesn't. At the same time, Sri Rupa Goswami is the very topmost, and Sri Rupa Manjari is the topmost. No Manjari is superior to her. She is the head of the group. So that is there as well. But this is not minimizing, because in our material mentality, we're materialists. We're getting purified. We're fundamentally materialists. We see everything materially. So if you see a very wealthy man, he's a billionaire, he's got $100. He's got so much more than him. Then we apply the same thinking to spiritualists. Srila Prabhupada, he preached in the West. He made 5,000 disciples in the West. He opened 108 temples. He opened farms. He translated, gave purports to so many books. How can you begin to compare that with anybody else? So then I should think that Srila Prabhupada is superior to Lokanath Goswami? What books did Lokanath Goswami write? What books is he even mentioned in? Practically none. He ordered Krishnadas Kaviraj not to put his name in. He only has one disciple, Narottam Das Thakur. Well, what about Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj? How many books did he write? He was illiterate. One disciple, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Without Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, is it possible that Srila Prabhupada would have even been? So we can't compare externally. And it's not, this is very much achintya beda. Again, because listen, because the power that the gurus have is not theirs. When we talk about people in this world, their wealth is theirs. The millionaire has more money than the $100 heir. When we're talking about transcendentalists, it's not theirs. They are simply pure servants. They're representing Nityananda Prabhu, and he and Gauranga are empowering them as they like to do the service they like. At the same time, the person who was empowered to do what nobody's ever done before was Srila Prabhupada. And to glorify him is very pleasing to his beloved masters, Nityananda, Mahaprabhu, Radha, and Krishna. So it's not a competition, and we're not minimizing Prabhupada's position. We're having to see both sides, always, both sides. So Prabhupada's power is not his own, and yet he was the one who received that power. So it's always this achintya, beda, beda, tattva. And in that regard, one verse, the last thing to say, because I'm hearing somewhere, maybe it's the demigods, the soft tinkling of kartals again. Next flowers will be raining. No. Was it Yasya Deve Para Bhaktiya Yatha Deve Tata Garo? That only to one who has implicit faith in both Guru and Krishna, to such a person, all the imports of the Vedic teachings, scriptures will be revealed. So this implicit faith. So Guru is simultaneously, he's the concentrated essence, the manifest personality of Krishna's own Kripa, compassion. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavats, dandavats.
Dandavats.
Beautiful.
So,
Thank you.
by the way, I
Thank
can
you.
mention all those mistakes pretty much at the beginning of each kirtan, each day, just so we keep me in perspective. That's been me, the lack of focus to just keep things in perspective.
Thank you so much, Nrsinga. That was very beautiful appreciation of Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I appreciate
And
you.
thank you
very
all,
much.
devotees. So now we're going to sing our Damodar Astakam, and thank you all for your attendance today, and all glories to our most beloved Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur
Namam Vishwaram Satchid Ananda Rupam Lasat Kudalogo Yashoda Vinyoru Kaladavamanam Param Vishwanatyanta Jodutya Drogyam Vidantamo Netra Yumam Rijantam Karam Loja Yudmena Sadanganetram Ushvasa Kampatri Ekanta Kanta Sita Driva Ramoda Rambandivana Viti Prithva Lila Ananda Tunde Swagoshami Majantam Anjapayantam Jadeya Shita Geshu Bhakta-jitarvam Prema Kastam Sataviti Vande Varandeva Mokshanga Moksha Vadimba Nakanyam Vineham Varishavadina Nikam Deva Pranata Gopala Balam Sarvamimanasya Vinasam Dimam Idam Teno Dhammo Janayattanilai Idam Vadavasutta Rakshasya Gopya Gosumitam Bimba Rakadaramne Manasavirasyam Namaste Namo Deva Namo Dhanananda Vishnu Vasida Prabodhuta Jagadimata Vipadristi Vishyati Vinambatano Vihane Samama Jama Rakshirusya Viverama Jovanya Mutyaiva Yadvas Svayamukhido Bhakti Bhajo Vikalya Tata Prema Bhakti Sakame Prayacha Namo Shriyo Home Shri Damodareha Namaste Sudame Swaradipname Adi Oraraya Ta Vishwasyaname Namo Radhikaya Kadiya Priyaya Namo Natalilaya Devaya Turyam Namo Radhikaya Kadiya Priyaya Namo Natalilaya Devaya Turyam Jaya Damodara Jaya Damodara Jaya Damodara Jaya Damodara
Radha Damodara
Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radha
Jaya Radha Damodara Damodara Radhe
Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radha
Jaya Radha Damodara Damodara Radhe
Jaya Radhe 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 Jaya Jaya Radhe
Radhe Radhe Radhe Jai 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 Shri Radhe
Jaya Radhe 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 Jaya Jaya Shri Radhe
Radhe Radhe Radhe Jai 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 Shri Radhe
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada.
Jai oh Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru.
Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo
Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Haribo
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Arupa Nuga Guru Vargya ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Vansha Kalpa Tarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhu Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha.